underdogs, underestimated, we the ones.
It's the Underdogs back with you, our final episode of June as we roll into summer and hot dog coverage, which we'll be doing next week. But right now, there's a lot going on in the sports calendar. I'm your host, Jordan Brenner, joined as always by Peter Keating. And joining us right off the bat, tonight's the NBA draft. Free agency is coming right around the bend. It is my old friend, Howard Beck of The Ringer. Howard, welcome to the podcast.
Jordan, good to see you. Peter, great to be back with you guys. I would like a double order of nachos and beer, Peter, if you don't mind.
I think this makes Howard officially a friend of the show, right? He's been a guest multiple times. Well, he was anyway, but now he's almost like guest host status.
I mean, I'm not sure Howard ever wants to be associated as being my friend, but sure, that'll look. He's already had to endure working with me, so as you know, that's
we already tried the co-hosting thing. It's been there, done that.
Yeah,
Howard and I can start a union,
or at least a support group. So look, let's get right into it, okay? We were texting yesterday, and one of the things I put was tonight's draft is, let's say, uninspiring. The free agency group is largely devoid of franchise altering number one players. And I said, could this be leading to a historic trade season as teams look to position themselves? And lo and behold, last night, the Michael Bridges trade goes down. So Howard, help us make sense. Is this just the first of many? What's going on?
Well, I mean, to be clear, we are in an era where trades are by far the bigger lever to pull than free agency anyway in this league. It's not that nobody ever changes teams via free agency, but the stars generally opt in or sign extensions and then say, yeah, actually, you know what? Thanks for the money. I'm not actually all that happy here. Send me somewhere better. And we see it over and over again, and we might see it again by the time we're done recording, for all I know, because any given minute or day, Paul George could decide to opt into the final year of his deal with the Clippers with a caveat that he wants to be dealt. Or he might get to free agency. And if he does, he will be the big fish in this free agent class with Philly and others chasing him. There's still the possibility of a sign and trade as well. But the Mikal Bridges trade is that is the standard order of business in today's NBA now. If you want to get talent, you're probably trading for it. If you want to get talent via trade, you need to first stockpile picks, as the Knicks very meticulously did over the last several years and very smartly did. And, you save them up for a rainy day. The rainy day came. The Brooklyn Nets, their pseudo rivals across the river, pulled the plug on whatever the heck this last year and a half was, and are doing the teardown that to me always felt inevitable once Durant and Kyrie Irving wanted out. So here we go. The Nets are now going to become the new, I don't want to say the new Oklahoma City, because there's a lot else that the Thunder have done well, but the stockpiling picks part of it, the Nets are all in on. Clearly, I expect there will be more to come. And the Knicks, got their 17th Villanova player.
So from an underdog perspective, Peter and I have talked a lot over the last year on the show about how this era of the NBA is really unlike most of what we see in the league's history. There's more parity. There's more ability for a team to jump from sort of that 4, 5, 6, what used to be a purgatory land, to actually contend. We saw it with the Nuggets 2 years ago. We saw it with the Timberwolves and the Thunder and Dallas this year. The Celtics were patient, made various moves. And even though they had a historically great season, I don't look at them as some sort of unbeatable favorite. So with that in mind, and there's all these teams that maybe are a move or two away from being able to contend for a conference finals. I mean, look, Indiana did it this year, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let's start with the Knicks. Does this move alone enable them to compete for a championship next year?
I don't mean to hedge here, but, we're speaking on the morning of June 26th, and there's a lot of offseason to go here. And with the Knicks in particular, are they re-signing OG Anunoby, and for how much? Did they get Bridges as I understand, all the buzz out there right now is they intend to keep Anunoby also. And of course, that's the wise move. I would love to have Anunoby and Mikal Bridges if I were any team that's trying to contend. And especially if you're trying to contend with the Celtics, who of course are strongest at the wings, and now you have two of the best 3-and-D wings in the NBA. But they haven't re-signed him yet. And I do think on some level there's a little bit of a hedge there too. Like, well, if Anunoby priced himself out and he does have an injury history and there are other teams that will be chasing him, at least you've got Bridges. But let's see how that plays out. And then there's the Isaiah Hartenstein part of this too, where, okay, yeah, Hartenstein and Mitchell Robinson were a great 1-2 punch for the Knicks this past season, but Hartenstein actually ended up being the better center and is certainly the more durable by far of the two, but he's a free agent and there are teams that could be throwing money at him. And the Knicks, we don't need to get into all the mechanics of today's CBA and aprons and second aprons and spatulas and oven mitts and stuff. But it's very, very difficult in today's NBA to pay everybody and still have tools at your disposal. And so there's no guarantee they're going to be able to keep Hartenstein. And I'm not saying that that's some catastrophic blow. He's a role player, but he's a really, really good, really important role player who they also had on a really great deal. And if getting Bridges somehow led to, I'm not suggesting it will, but if that somehow led to, because of cap reasons and tax reasons and everything else, losing Hartenstein and OG Anunoby, then you would look at that differently than you did at the moment of the trade when you just went, oh, wow, what a great pickup. And Bridges is a fantastic acquisition for the Knicks. But as with everything in this league, there's cause and effect, and you got to see what the dominoes are behind this and who else the Knicks keep and or lose.
So Jordan, Howard's touching on a couple of things that are really important that we have discussed. One of them is, hey, before you go and say somebody's given away too many draft picks in a trade, that's why they acquired the draft picks to begin with, right? The draft picks are now much in today's environment. Jordan, you've said this is turning out to be more true than I ever would have expected. Draft picks are most useful as capital in trade acquisitions. And so there are different phases of rebuilding now. One of them is when you're acquiring all these picks, but you don't actually then move on typically to use those picks to draft players. You use them to bundle them up to get other players in trades. That's number one. Having said that, there's another risk, something you and I have talked about, which is if you put all of your resources into plan A without being able to execute a plan B if plan A doesn't work because you've hamstrung yourself, that can be a problem if you spend all of your money and all of your time. But I think that what we're hearing out of New York is all the right stuff. Like they're exploring ways to trade Mitchell Robinson. Like they want to keep Anunoby. I mean, look, like the reason they're doing this to begin with is because they want to compete with Boston right where they should be wanting to compete with them. When it comes to Hartenstein, don't you think like there's an interesting question? Did the Knicks find all of this talent and liberate it, or did the Knicks develop this talent? And could they get other role players in and have Thibodeau and the rest of the team develop some talent that's unexpected the way they developed Hartenstein and DiVincenzo and Hart?
The problem is, Peter, they paid for those guys. And if they throw all this money, that financial flexibility they had to offer those guys on decent deals, but enough money to lure them goes away.
That's the real risk. That's the risk that you then don't have any flexibility left at all.
But to what Howard was saying, and I want to actually pivot this toward another team now, Howard, is it doesn't feel like a move you make unless you're pretty confident about bringing OG back, because otherwise you're sort of replacing somewhat like for somewhat like. I think Bridges is probably a better player, but you haven't marginally increased yourself and you've given up a ton of assets.
Right.
So deciding when and with whom to cash in those assets is the $1 million question with these rebuilding teams. And that's why I want to pivot to the Thunder, Howard. The window is certainly feeling like it's now. They still have 1 million picks at their disposal. Sam Presti is also very cautious in how he goes about these things. Is this the summer where they take that next step and move toward being a premier title contender?
Well, I mean, they took step one in flipping Josh Giddey for Alex Caruso, right? So everybody's been saying, it's time to hit the gas and accelerate your development by maybe swapping out some of the youth for veterans. Well, they did a 1-for-1, Giddey 21 years old for Caruso 30. And I think Caruso is a better fit. I think it's a great move. It's probably not all they're going to do, and it may not be all that they need to do. But I do think the Thunder have, and I understand like the pushback immediately when I say that they have the benefit of time, the luxury of time, because their guys are young. The flip side of that is always, you never have as long as you think you do, right? Windows in the NBA today are very short sometimes because of everything, shorter contracts and injuries and guys all of a sudden waking up one day and deciding they want to play somewhere else. Like the time is always now. I get that, but they're a really young team that just broke through in a major way. No one on earth thought they would be the number 1 seed in the West this past season. And do they need more heft in the front court? Would Hartenstein, for instance, look really good next to or in a rotation with Chet Holmgren? Sure.
Yes.
I expect there's more to come. When are they finally going to, if ever, consolidate all those extra picks that they have for the big swing? Who knows? But look, they're already ahead of the game. They're a 50+ win team with young talent that is still getting better, with all the optionality, all the flexibility in the world, still have cap room. I don't know what else they do this summer. I suspect something else is coming. I know that's really vague, but I don't think that Sam Presti's going to sit idly by and just say, we'll just let this slowly develop. My guess is that they make another move.
There's one other factor in the NBA right now that may accelerate windows a little bit, and it's this looming potential that Victor Wembanyama is such a game changer that he eclipses everyone else's builds just by virtue of who he is.
And the clock is ticking now, louder than it would have been.
Where do you think, so, again, we look at in the offseason, our mission is to find teams capable of making a huge turnaround from one season to another, future bets and the rest of it, which you're not interested in. But how close are the Spurs to being able to accelerate their building timeline around Wemby based off what he showed as a rookie? And are there some moves they can make this summer to be a playoff team next year?
I'm really hesitant to make any declarations about the Spurs in particular, because while Wembanyama was projected as, and obviously, absolutely, as a rookie, looked like a transcendent generational type talent who should make the Spurs contenders for years to come, it was just his rookie season, and they won 22 games, and that's not on Wembanyama, but it just shows you how far they are roster-wise and supporting cast-wise from being serious contenders. And the West, as we know, is stacked. Now, we are in an inflection point, or in the midst of an inflection point, where teams like the Warriors and the Clippers and the Lakers, all with older talent, and who knows, the Clippers could lose Paul George. There are some teams that are teetering a little bit and may not be in this picture much longer. But Oklahoma, Denver, Minnesota aren't going anywhere. I don't think Dallas is going anywhere anytime soon. The Suns are another teetering team, right? Like they went all in on some really expensive stars. They're hamstrung. I don't know that they've got any way out of this, but the Pelicans are young and improving and are going to try to flip Brandon Ingram this summer. The Kings are, solid and are going to be around for a while. The Rockets made a leap last season. The Grizzlies were only down because of injury, so they're going to be right back in the mix. Like, where's the opening to get in there and become real contenders? Now, Wembanyama has a better number 1 than almost everybody I just listed, or if he's not, he will be soon. So I'm not saying that the Spurs are behind all of these teams. I think they're going to leapfrog a bunch of them eventually, but there's a lot they have to do still around Wembanyama. So the idea that like year 2, we should expect them to be like right in the middle of the playoff pack, 4th or 5th in the West or something, that might be too soon. And I don't think the history of the NBA suggests that that's a leap you can reasonably make that quickly. But again, who knows? The Spurs have a pretty savvy front office. Maybe they've got 15 deals lined up that we'll see over the next week or so.
So then let me ask both of you guys, in either the East or the West, what's your favorite team that's a plateau above the Spurs, but wasn't a legit championship contender, who can use some of the enormous cap space they have or other assets to make that kind of leap? I was talking to Jordan yesterday, and I said, why would a free agent go to Houston? And he said, he shocked me by saying he thinks Houston's closer to the contending level than maybe people realize. And I was like, oh, that's interesting, because they did take a big leap and they do have a lot of cash. Who's a team you think is the next who could make that surge? Is it Orlando? Is it someone else? What would you say?
It depends on what we're like, from where to where. When we talk about like the leap, are we talking about from lottery to playoff, or from low playoff to higher
let's say
playoff?
From mediocrity to high level playoffs, plus possibly further surprises.
I mean, weirdly, the Philadelphia 76ers fit that bill, because they were They were, but I know
Right.
that's not really the kind of team we're
And somehow
talking
they
about
do
here.
have $50 million to blow, right? Which is, I don't know, how is that even possible?
If they get Paul George, it's going to make them very formidable to say the least, and we'll have a great at least 3 to 4 team race in the East, depending on what else the Bucks do. But the Knicks are in that, obviously. Or Orlando, it feels like for the last couple of years has been like right on the cusp of something, but the Magic have not been a particularly aggressive team via in free agency or trades for most of the last 10 years. And like, okay, you've got a nice 1-2 punch right now, and they're young and growing, whatever. But is this the summer that you make the deal for a DeJounte Murray or Trae Young or whoever it may be? Like, are you going to finally go get a point guard? They really need one. I don't think just internal development is going to put the Magic in the mix in the East. And I think it's going to be really tough anyway, given what the Celtics already are and what the Knicks are doing right now and what the Sixers might still do. So again, it depends on what we're talking about in terms of like making the leap. I'm not as high on the Rockets apparently as Jordan is. I think there's some great potential there, and they made a nice leap last year, and then it kind of tailed off a little bit. And I'm still not sold entirely on Jalen Green. And okay, if they get some veterans and they hit the gas, all right, but who? Which veterans? Like I don't know who they're getting. So I think there's that basic outline of a team that's ready to make a leap, but I don't know if it's from lottery team to contender. It's more like lottery team to like solid playoff team that maybe wins around.
Yep. Well, let's also not forget that Memphis does still exist, and if they get healthy and get Ja turned around, there's a lot. This was a top team just 2 years ago, and so let's not. Yes. I think everyone's sort of forgotten about them, and they're lingering somewhere in this mix, but. We can't linger with you any longer, Howard, because we've already taken a ton of your time and we've got some soccer to discuss. So thank you for being here. Thank you for once again agreeing to be with us. We will miss you.
Great being with you guys. Thanks for having me.